Growing up on YouTube, I vividly remember watching Casey Neistat's daily vlogs and being fascinated by his unique style and philosophy. From a high school dropout who worked as a dishwasher supporting his child at 17, to the man who made people proud to be YouTubers, amassing 12.5 million subscribers and influencing generations to pick up the camera. For some reason, I continued coming back to Casey's videos throughout the years, maybe because of comfort, maybe nostalgia, and I started wondering, what made Casey Neistat so creative?
I gotta testify, come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day I die, I'ma touch the sky. Gotta testify, come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day I die, I'ma touch the sky. Back when they thought pink polos would hurt the rock, before Cam got the shit to pop, the doors is closed. I felt like bad boy street team, I couldn't work the locks. Now let's go, take them back to the plan. Me and my mama hopped in that U-Haul van. Any pessimists, I ain't talk to them. Plus I ain't had no phone in my apartment.
Keep the game, long as I keep the fame and keep my name. Kanye to the West, said you from the outfit. I told her, here we go.
This story begins in 1998 with the birth of Casey's firstborn child named Owen. Casey was only 17, and that following year, iMovie was released on the first ever IMAX. In 2000, Casey's older brother Van Neistat introduced him to filmmaking. He fell in love with filmmaking immediately. Being the youngest of four, he desperately craved attention growing up, and with filmmaking, he finally had a tool to share his ideas.
What was the dream to do?
I mean, I wanted to make movies.
But you didn't have the skills yet. You were kind of doing a little
I
bit.
knew how to edit an iMovie.
Wow.
No, I didn't have any skills. There are only like 2 times in my life where I genuinely have no idea what I was thinking. And I moved to New York City in June of 2001 with $800 and a place to stay for 3 months.
This was on top of his responsibilities as a father. Most people are driven by positive visions of the future, imagining how good it will be once they reach their goals. Casey, however, was different. His drive was galvanized by fear.
The greatest fear for this like beautiful little baby boy was that he would grow up and see his dad as a loser. And that is once those basic needs are met, that's an incredibly powerful motivator.
Yeah.
In New York City, Casey met Tom Sachs, a contemporary artist and I would argue a pivotal character who fostered Casey's thirst for knowledge and encouraged him to cultivate and continue making his movies. If you've looked at Tom Sachs's art and studio, you can see the influence he had on Casey. From the organization, love for plywood, making things their own, and the philosophy of bricolage. Tom Sachs believes humans crave and desire beauty, that we want to have transcendent experiences, and artists are the ones that make that happen. Art makes us see the world differently, and it's the artist's job to preserve the human spirit. Authenticity was a part of his artwork. He would leave the glue smears, the quote-unquote mistakes on his work. He said,
and yet Apple could never make anything as shitty as the things that I make. I mean, this is the advantage that the artist has over industry. The artist can tell the story of the individual. The artist can say, I was there.
And I love that quote, because it rings so true to who Tom Sachs is. He doesn't care if he can replicate and make the perfect iPhone. He takes pride in being able to make it his own way. And when you look at his pieces, you can see the work, see the glue smears, the imperfections, and yet it speaks way more truth about the human spirit than it does a damn iPhone. The same applies to Casey's work, who never got a formal education in filmmaking, which constantly forced him to figure out problems with available resources. Casey leaves the glue smears in too. He holds a shot for a little longer to give a glimpse into the behind the scenes, shows his failures, his mess ups, and it ultimately makes his videos more authentic. On the Pretty Big Deal podcast, Casey stated,
Like, I don't care how cool you are, if I don't believe you, you're not going to work on this platform.
Because you can't Facetune a YouTube channel.
You can't.
authenticity was extremely important to Casey, and he stayed true to making videos as a means of sharing his ideas and perspectives with the world. Casey found his voice telling stories back in the trailer park when Owen could barely walk, and he continued telling stories about anything that interested him. When he was frustrated with something, he would share his frustration via video. When he got a new piece of tech in the mail, he would obsess over it like a kid on Christmas. Wouldn't you? When he posed a challenge to himself, he would sacrifice and suffer to be true to himself, to finish what he started, sometimes going to the extremes, but that was just who Casey was. Casey worked for Tom Sachs from 2001 to 2004 and continued to stay in touch throughout his years in New York City. The current relationship between Tom Sachs and Casey is somewhat unclear. In most of his vlogs, he mentioned a famous artist that he worked for, but neglected to include his name. The first time I started digging deeper into Tom Sachs' work was when Van Neistat posted his video on mentorship. It's clearly both were influenced heavily by Tom Sachs' style, but instead of crediting Sachs, Casey was mostly silent about it, and in fact went as far as to dedicate a video about copycats, which left a sour taste in my mouth.
The thing about theft is that you cheat. You just look at what somebody else is doing and say, I'll just do what he's doing, and I'll pretend that was my own idea. The really tough part about that is how much work it takes to be original, how much brain power, how much consideration it takes to make sure you're coming up with ideas that are truly your own.
On Twitter, he even said that Tom Sachs was not his mentor, which I mean was true in 2014, but between 2001 and 2004, I don't know. Regardless, Tom Sachs' domain wasn't filmmaking, so Casey and Van were able to take Sachs' artistic philosophies and experiment with their own ideas and interests. Casey did not work alone. To my surprise, his older brother Van worked with him on every movie up until 2010. iPod's Dirty Secrets, a viral hit before YouTube even existed, was released in 2003. Yeah, that was Van's idea. He was behind the camera. This collaboration allowed Casey not only to take more chances with his work, but he had a partner in crime, allowing him to keep on trying new things and figure out his style. In 2007-2008, Casey made it into the mainstream space for filmmaking, produced some feature films, and he also made The Neistat Brothers with Van, which was released in 2010. Soon after though, he defected, left mainstream TV and films, and pursued new media. In 2011-2012, Casey worked with the New York Times to release OpDocs, short opinion documentaries, and started doing big branded content deals with Nike as well as Google. And on March 25th, 2015, as Casey turned 34, he started his daily vlogging challenge. Looking back in an interview, Casey stated,
Really, like if you just zoom back and look at all that, it's all just YouTube videos. I just put them in different places before YouTube became what YouTube was.
Casey had been refining his craft for 15 years at that point, putting in the work day in, day out. When Casey was still a young adult, he had to work in order to pay the bills and keep Owen fed. This meant he had to educate himself in less conventional ways. He did this notably by reading and watching films. Casey was inspired by war movies like Paths of Glory, Saving Private Ryan, and most importantly, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, a British movie made during World War II. In The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, Casey saw the directors Emmerich Pressburger and Michael Powell, who to note inspired Martin Scorsese, saw them as rebels. They released this movie in 1943, in the middle of World War II, where the Nazis taking over the world was a serious fear, especially in Great Britain. And despite that fact, despite the serious budget limitations, despite the consequences of not following orders, and keeping extremely controversial scenes in.
They never got the knighthood, the K. But they got the picture, and now so do you. So I really hope you appreciate it.
His favorite documentary was Little Dieter Needs to Fly by Werner Herzog in 1997. It was about a Vietnam fighter pilot who got shot down on his first mission and was trapped as a POW for a number of years.
That movie will bring you to your knees, and it shows you, like, that's one of those movies that anytime you're having a bad day or you think you've got it hard, you watch that movie and you understand what it means to survive.
In Little Dieter Needs to Fly, I not only learned what true survival was, from growing up in post-war Germany, where as kids they had to rip off wallpaper from bombed buildings to cook it for nutrients in the glue, to later surviving in the Vietnam jungle and prison camps. Dieter never fully accepted his death, rebelled against it in fact, and survived. And after all of that, followed by living his dream as a test pilot for private and commercial aircraft, where he survived 4 more crashes. Damn. His two most favorite books are the autobiography of Malcolm X and a textbook on the Second World War by John Keegan. These two books helped him learn how business and life worked and how to make decisions with incomplete information. The autobiography of Malcolm X was an eye-opening read. In school, I was taught that Malcolm X promoted violence during the civil rights movement. If Martin Luther King Jr. was the good guy, Malcolm X was the bad guy. Reading his autobiography, though, I learned this was far from the truth. Malcolm X grew up on the streets of Harlem, learned how to hustle his way around life and death situations, and his prison sentencing was the ultimate university education. No distractions, no girls, just books and his own mind, for 6.5 years. By the end of his life, he knew he was going to be assassinated, and yet he continued to move forward. Malcolm X was a flawed man with a horrible past, and at the same time, his bravery and commitment to helping his community is an attribute we rarely see nowadays. Rest in peace, Malcolm X. As one of 8 children, Casey found Malcolm X as someone he could relate to. Malcolm X stating, "So early in life, I learned that if you want something, you had better make some noise." I think iPod's Dirty Secrets showcase this beautifully, with vibrant Apple posters being graffitied by Casey about the battery life issue of the device, all filmed and shared on the internet, pre-YouTube, spreading through email. And soon after, Apple changed their battery policy, and Casey got what he wanted. And maybe one of the most important things he learned from Malcolm X was, quote, "What makes the ghetto hustler yet more dangerous is his glamour. To the school dropout youth in the ghetto teenagers see the sharp and flashy money, no respect for anybody or anything, and so they become attracted to the hustler worlds of dope, thievery, prostitution." Being a high school dropout himself, Casey knew the implications of his rebellious nature, if not nurtured and cared for, could quickly turn into ego and materialism. Casey, I would argue, did most things right, and I think his Do What You Can't video sums this up beautifully.
To the haters, the doubters, my 7th grade vice principal, to everyone who's ever told anyone with a dream they can't, this video's for you.
He used his energy as a way to inspire others, to tell his story and share his ideas, and most importantly, to work hard and be brave. While watching his content, I never got the feeling that he was trying to show off. Whether it was his free first-class flights to Dubai, new tech he got in the mail, or any other aspects of his life. To me, I saw a man sharing his life, carving his own path, the good and the bad, sprinkling in vegetables along the way, little nuggets of wisdom and inspiration. I believe that inside every single young man there's a rebel. When I was a little kid, I'd naturally be rebellious. I would escape the house, sneak under the gate with my little bike, and bike down all the way to my grandma's. I would wink at the camera when it was pointed at me, and I loved to play with fire. But as I grew older and school started, I began to conform to expectations of teachers and started using my energy towards adhering to grading policies. I was playing the game of school, doing the bare minimum to get good grades, trying to fit into my friend group, and hoping to fulfill my parents' expectations. All this to say that as I grew up, I became less rebellious. Sure, I'd gotten out of my edgy middle school phase, but Casey wasn't edgy. It was tasteful rebelliousness. Growing up in southeastern Connecticut, in a small lower middle class industrial town in the early 90s, there was a rigid conservatism in the air, and young Casey didn't fit in. Instead of conforming though, Casey said, no, f that, and decided to carve his own path, maybe as a reaction to his surroundings, or maybe because of his rebellious spirit. And that rebellious spirit stayed with him into adulthood. As New Yorkers were stuck in traffic in their cars, Casey whipped through the streets on his boosted board. Opening packages by cutting the tape? Nah, destroy the entire thing. When he was frustrated at something, he made a movie about it. I mean, just look at him, he's still doing it today.
Parked in the...
And while the Kardashians had their reality TV in 2015, Casey made his own reality TV in the form of vlogging, but way more authentic. In a way, Casey's videos are a form of taking back that rebellious nature. and he does it tastefully because of how authentic it feels. By watching his videos, the audience is able to live in his shoes and his rebellious actions. Maybe that's why I keep coming back to his videos. Maybe it's because of that hunger, that desire to be who we truly are, that draws us into Casey's work. His rebelliousness resonates with us on a deeper level, and we soon find ourselves binging his content.